Thank you, Sir Colin, for the opportunity. The pleasure is mine to be part of this series. And thank you, Monique, for providing that the backstory and the rationale behind the development of information of research ethics. I think it's important information to give us a platform to start from. And my role, I believe, is to continue on with the talk and provide some information about Christian ethics and Niue culture. I'm very, very much thinking about researchers and how to develop a framework for us here in Niue, and the things that we are to be aware of as we build this framework, taking into consideration the traditional knowledge, the place of the Christian teaching in developing our unique Niue culture and ethics. And so, yes, Colin, I did my PhD in ecclesiology, which basically means I studied church. And my focus was on what it means to be church in a liquid postmodernity. What does it mean to be being church in a world where it never stopped changing? It's always in transformation. Identities change, cultures change, people change with time. And so how do we adapt as a church, and how do we become relevant and continue to be relevant in today's changing world? Especially for those in diaspora, I think is really important to continue to be relevant and to be important, and to have a voice of reason and conscience to an ever-changing world, particularly for our people who are living and becoming church in a different way while living overseas. But let me start by asking a question. Next slide, please, Denzel. Starting by asking the question about what is Christian ethics. And I think most of us will understand that a lot of ethical stuff that we talk about basically emanates from the Bible, the teachings of the Bible, or other religions. So it's a study of what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong. It interrogates what we should do, and what we love, and what we should resist as moral beings. So it helps us to determine what we should do in life to benefit others. Now, it also seeks to apply biblical principles to different situations in life where we face ethical problems and challenges. And Christian ethics kind of give us a guidance on issues like relationships and work and social responsibility and service. In other words, Christian ethics is about living a life guided by the principles that we find in the Bible, particularly the values of love and compassion, seeking to reflect the character of God that's revealed in the person and ministry of Jesus Christ in all areas of our lives. So Christian ethics is based really in the commandment, the most important commandment in the Bible, and that is loving God with all your being and loving one's neighbor as you love yourself. These are the founding principles of Christian ethics. Next slide, please. And so I'm now morph into our culture, the cultural context, and how ethics sit in with that. And just for researchers and data collectors, and those of us who will be sitting down and establishing a framework for research ethics. I'm being very mindful that we are to be mindful. We are to be aware of our cultural understandings, our taonga, our epistemologies, our worldviews, I think it's important for those coming to the island or local doing research to understand that these are important backdrops or context to be considered. So the first one I want to talk about is the idea koe kaina hea tua, the household of God. So the kaina hea tua framework is this idea is not exclusively Niuean, rather is a concept that is shared around Oceania, that the whole environment is understood and experienced as a family of God, that we have to consider that the environment, the biodiversity, creation is just as important and are part of the family, the household of God. It's important also to understand that we are created in the image of God. Therefore, every human being has intrinsic value. We have intrinsic worth. And so the first and comprehensive objective as a researcher is to guard and protect the participants, to protect their dignity, to be mindful of their rights and their welfare. And the research is directed in a way that will help, that will assist the welfares of the people, of the families, and communities as a whole, or the whole kaina. Next slide, please. So the next idea or framework is mo'i, koe mo'i katoa. It's not just part of life; it's the whole of life approach. I remember Sir Robert Briggs often say in funerals of important people of stature, he would say in Niue, koe tangata tangata, koe tangata tangata, pakawhai tangata. Well, the person of concern is one with integrity. It's describing someone with integrity because he or she is aware of and respond to all parts, all aspects of life. One who is very aware of one's surrounding and the need and the need to serve. So it's a whole of life approach that acknowledges the intrinsic value of all of God's creation, because we all belong to that kaina, to that home, the household of God. There's also a saying, Nepehemai, ka noa moe atua si seao e tangata. Without God, life ceases to exist. So the proverb suggests that tangata, in this sense, alludes to and includes the whole environment. Because they make it tangata ke mui hoyeni, kai mai ki atua e fuaki e revekianga he tomenosi mai tangata. Another saying, it goes like this: Ko hako koe, ko koe hako. It goes, I am because you are because I am. The colonized mind has subtracted, or at the very least, diminished the environment when defining tangata in the Niue context. When we speak of ko koe hako, reminds us of our interdependency. That we are dependent upon one another's love, grace, and generosity, not just the relationship between us humans, but also with the tufungasia, the organisms, the other life forms and objects around us. So it's important for us to be very aware as researchers and as we form something that we are aware of all life around us, not just human beings. Mo'i katoa, whole of life, is being mindful and inclusive of all members of the community. So in terms of planning and the execution of one's research project, especially the vulnerable members or the groups we are to be aware of them, be mindful of those who are talkative, mindful of those who are silent, the migrant or the other among us. So we are to be aware of those of everyone. Just being mindful of their social and natural environment is just as important. Next slide, please. In my thesis, I used the metaphor of the umu as one of the guiding metaphors, and also develop a methodology using that the idea of the umu, or the fellowship of the umu. The umu, of course, as we know, is a traditional earth oven, lovo or hangi. It's a practice that displays and affirms and highlights Christian and cultural values of relationship with whakawhitui, the whakawhituianga, and community. These are very important. If you think about times when community get together to umu, to make the umu, values such as generosity, being reciprocal in nature, giving and receiving gifts, reaffirming familiar relationships, and so forth and so forth. These are important part of being in that umu community. So umu model represents a relationality, being reciprocal, and the fact that we are interconnected as a community. So as researchers, we are to be very aware of these fundamental frameworks or worldviews that we hold as Niueans. It's so important. The next slide. So relationship with whakawhituianga. So every relation, I believe that research often becomes a lonely thing for example, one doing a PhD or doing a postgrad studies, because you have your supervisor, you have your support team, but you are the one who will be burning the midnight oil or burning the candle on both ends. But we also have to be aware in a Niuean context, or in the Pacific context, research must be relational. We need to consider the interconnectedness of the individual and his or her family and their community. So those who are being part of the project or the research, we need to be aware of that you are becoming part of that family or that person. So it's not just a person, but that person is part of the family. The participant is part of a wider family and community. Therefore, consider joining that person or the family in community functions and so forth. So understanding the practice and practicing respect for relationships, respecting all participants with humility, especially those who are custodians of our traditional knowledge, our knowledge holders. That we are to be very, very respectful of those people, of elders of all people, but particularly those who hold our traditional knowledge, because that's the way of the umu. Being holistic also, I think, is an important approach. We are not one-dimensional or two-dimensional. We are to look at research in a holistic way. We are to be mindful of the participants' place within that whole community, their intimate connection to their immediate environment and biodiversity. Next slide, please. Researchers, and as we develop this framework, we are also to be aware that community-based approach is most appropriate for Niue and indeed for indigenous communities. So impact to and for the community, I think beneficence is the key word here. Researchers must be mindful of people and factors within the extended family and community. Ideally, research should be developed by the community for the community. Because at the end, the end goal must ensure that the most positive impact to and for the manga, or the motu, or the tautanga needs to benefit the whole as a community, not just an individual. Another important community-based approach is that of conversation with utala, with so with utala, with participant is a given. But the researcher must also needs to understand the nature of Niue's relational approach, which means group discussions and conversations are alternative approaches to research. Um, it's, it's not just an individual thing. There are many, many ways to do this. So participants in research are not just individuals, they're part of the wide circle of family and community. And so best to engage beyond the individual, but also include the environment as well. Being aware of the diversity and common factors within the community, one must consider other methodologies to employ. And I often encourage people to be acutely aware of synesthetics. So synesthetics, the ability to use and engage all senses, all of our senses, of both the participants and the researcher. So as a researcher, we are to be aware and to read the room, to read the context, the background, what's going on around the research placement. And so methodologies may need to use different forms like song or chant or dance, art, depending on the research matter, of course, and your expected goals. Next slide, please. The other part of the UMU model is koe whakalilifu, ko mahani whakalilifu. Anga motu atau tolu te whakamua whakalilifu. That we respect is utmost important. I think I'll touch on this in the earlier slide. Elders trying to be aware and follow the community protocols and etiquette, mindful of language, including body language, other forms of communication. Oftentimes in Niue, we are to think about dress code, mannerisms, cultural and social expectations. So to gauge the context of participants, one may need to attend, for example, church or village gatherings and be part, blending into the participant community. Also, always remember to treat informants and the acquired information with utmost respect, not just respecting the participant, but also the information that you have extracted. It needs to be recorded properly, it needs to be documented properly, correctly, because oftentimes information is a taonga. It's a taonga of the family or of the community. So it's really, really important to keep that in mind. Next slide. Part of the UMU model is leveki ufiufi menhakai talanoa. Confidentiality is important. Now, it's not easy in small community in Niue. I always remember the warning by elders as they caution those who are immature. They always say, ufiufi the manat. In other words, cover your thoughts or your words. So be and another saying, they would say, be careful when you speak. In other words, the researcher or data collector must obtain some idea of how to, well, it's important to keep information confidential depending on the response of the participant, and be very careful how we use them. Researchers' awareness of language and conceptual differences between communities and ethnic groups. There are differences. We're not all the same here in Niue. Each village may have a slightly different way of looking at things and doing things. Classic example is talanoa, the word talanoa. So talanoa is often used in our Pacifica communities to refer to conversations and discussions, and I often hear talanoa sessions by university or other groups. But it means more to us Niue people, than informal conversation or shooting the breeze. Tala means to speak or story, but noa means nothing or meaningless. So talk sometimes in a negative way. It also means gossip, rumor, and it also means intentionally revealing secrets and confidential information. But here, people often say, "Tala no de koyo." So when planning research, we need to avoid. We need to be very careful what we share, what we receive, and who to share the information with, and we need to be very, very careful. So, because it means that trust is central as part of the research ethics, the ability to honor the participants' request for confidentiality, protecting anonymity and confidentiality of participants is critical. It's very, very important, especially in our small country, Niue. And also, I think it's important that in contexts where something's not right, participants have the right to withdraw from the conversation, and the researcher need to accept this and ask the question. And lastly, the last slide, and something that I think is important for us to look at going forward, is the loss of taonga mga whaua, te taonga maanga, mo te taonga motu, the loss of private and community and national properties and traditional knowledge. There's a saying that goes, be careful with family taonga. Properties and information such as family stories, history, traditional knowledge, traditional medicine, and so forth, to be respected and treated in accordance with the wishes of the participant or his or her family or the host community. That is very, very important to be aware of. But there's a saying, I remember my grandfather who coined this, who said this, and has now become common. Matagi Vilitama said, "Koe wangahau Niue hane aro mai." Koe wangahau Niue hane aro mai. It's symbolic of a lot of our taonga. In other words, the wangahau Niue is waving goodbye, and a lot of our traditional knowledge are also waving goodbye. So there's a gradual loss of traditional knowledge and taonga over the past decades. And so the question I want to leave with us, and I think it's important to take this forward, is that what's the approach going forward to address the tension between protecting the privacy of traditional knowledge and sharing them for the benefit of the community? I think that's really important. So, yeah.